Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Woo! Welcome in, everybody. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. I'm Brian Drake of FightingChanceFantasy.com, the luckiest man in fantasy football. Why am I so lucky, you may ask? Well, it's because I get to sit here with my good friend, Dwain McFarland of Pro Football Focus and Establish the Run and just talk ball. And boy, tonight we got a lot to talk about just as we were coming on air. No, I wasn't grabbing a beer. Well, okay, yeah, I was grabbing a beer. But the news broke. Leveon Bell was just released by the New York Jets. So besides all the Dak Prescott, Andy Dalton, Chase Claypool talk we have to have tonight, Dwain, as we bounce around the league. Good evening to you. We have to talk about Leveon Bell now finding a new home.
Yeah, man. It's interesting. We've got football on a Tuesday night in this crazy year. At least this game is getting in. Now we've got Leveon Bell release. You already mentioned the other guys. It's going to be a pretty packed show, Drake.
Yeah. So let's just get into that right off the top because it's the hot news. Leveon Bell released. I believe he only has 19 carries on the season. He's been banged up. It's just not been a great fit. He hates Adam Gase. Adam Gase hates him. He's made a boatload of dough, and now the Jets are on the hook for all that cash. Going forward with the Jets, let's start with their situation. Frank Gore and LaMichael Pirine. What are your thoughts on these two guys? And are either of them worth it? Because this team just sucks.
I mean, if I'm going to take a shot, I'm going to take a shot on the younger player, to be honest. So that would be Pirine for me. I don't really want to roster Frank Gore. I really don't want to roster many Jets, period, outside of Jamison Crowder. So for me, it's not a high priority, but if I were to just throw, some pennies out there, it's going to be on Pirine.
We can sit here and make up stories. Hey, we think he should go here. I think he should go there. I think he's going to go back to Pittsburgh. If I had to lay a nickel down on it, you and I were kind of talking off air, a couple landing spots that would make sense. You had a few good ones. Boy, oh boy, could he muck up a situation in Arizona if he landed there with Kenyan Drake, not exactly setting the world on fire. Seattle. And this is what we were talking about before we came on the air. I don't think he's going to go to some junk team. He just did that. He's going to want to go somewhere with a chance to win. And to me, where else is there a better chance to win than where you came from in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh would be, an option. That would be interesting because they did also draft McFarland, and they have 4 guys, so they would have to make room for him. But I could see it. I think you mentioned one, the Cardinals. I mean, with Kenyan Drake, whether it's his leg, whatever it may be, he's not quite right. I could easily see him landing there. I agree that I think he's going to want to go somewhere where he can actually play for a team that could win. That puts the Bears in play. How different is he from David Montgomery at this point? Montgomery is like an east-west guy that never goes north and south. I worry that could be what Bell is, and he was just a perfect schematic fit, right, with what the Steelers did, which, again, points back to the Steelers. But I think the other area, he could go to the Bucs. They would obviously have to do something, with Fournette or one of these other guys. But, hell, they've signed every, free agent running back. They've got McCoy. They've got Fournette. They could easily move on from McCoy. He would give Brady the back he would want that truly can be, solid in the passing game and still do the other things that Bruce Arians would want him to do. The 49ers could always be in play. They're always willing to add a guy into the mix. I think the one other team could be the Seahawks because Carlos Hyde is still struggling with injury. You don't know what's going to happen with Rashad Penny. And Chris Carson, solid player, but he stays hurt quite a bit. And with the evolution of what the Seahawks offense now is, that could potentially be a fit, for Leveon Bell, a guy getting involved in the passing game, that kind of thing. So I think any one of those could be spots. There's really only a few. New England could definitely, be in play. There's not too many places because I don't own him, Drake. So for me, there's not too many places that I look at and go, oh man, if he lands there, it's just going to be lights out. Like I feel like pretty much everywhere he could go, there are solid backs already, and he would have to share time. But the ones that would scare me the most would be the Cardinals. Anytime somebody good lands with the 49ers, I think the Seahawks could be the other one. I think that would still be a timeshare, though. I think they like Chris Carson quite a bit. I think the Bears would be the other one where I feel like he could come in, just take the whole thing. I think he just takes the whole backfield over. Basically he'd get 80% of the work. That would be the other one. I think all the rest he's still gonna, assuming he doesn't go to a losing team, all the rest he's still gonna be in a timeshare, at least to start, and he would have to earn more time.
Yeah, according to our friends over at Spot Rack, his release leaves behind $15 million in dead cap for 2020, another $4 million next year. Bell earned $28 million across 18 games played for the Jets. This is a weird season. He could just sit at home and collect the rest of that contract. He doesn't need to go out and sign anything new. So, he very well could do that. So, see what happens with Leveon Bell. Hey,
I think he wants to prove something new. I think he's definitely a guy that's going to have a chip on his shoulder. I think he signed somewhere.
We usually start off the top of the show here with waivers. Here's a little bit of information. If you play on Yahoo, they have sent out a release tonight. They're pushing back their waivers one day. So instead of the usual overnight Tuesday, which is, tonight when we record, and Wednesday morning you wake up with your players, they're going to push it a day to Thursday now because obviously there's a Bills-Titans game going on Tuesday evening. So just a heads up, you're playing on Yahoo. Whatever format you play on, be aware. Boy, the other big news, and it was right in your backyard, Dak Prescott goes down, fractured ankle, really gruesome injury. Hate to see that for anybody. I'm obviously an Eagles fan, but I'm not a dick. I don't hate, players as people. I don't want to see them get hurt. So that stinks for Dak. He's a good dude by all accounts. Andy Dalton, let's spin it forward into fantasy football now, is your quarterback in Dallas. What does this do, Dwain, for the skill position players in Dallas? Because this defense is still abysmal. I think the running game can help sustain some drives. And I think if you like Justin Herbert, you need to love Andy Dalton on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I think they're going to try to change the offense, but you just I think you hit the key, though, is will the defense allow them to? They're not going to start games the way they have, which a lot of people probably say, oh, so great. They won't fall down by 21 points immediately, which may be a good thing. And real quick, before we move into it, man, I was so sad for Dak. I was getting ready to have dinner with my family. We had the game on, I had the steaks on the grill, the chicken, we're doing our thing. And then that happened. And it literally took the air, out of all of us. And it wasn't just for the Cowboys. It's just because Dak really is a good dude. And you saw it in the support that came out from around the league, Mahomes and everybody basically lifting him up, even Wentz, which I thought was a classy act by, a huge rival quarterback in Wentz. So I thought, Carson Wentz moved up in my book. He may not be playing that great this year, but he seems like, also a great human being. And we forget that about these guys. Like you said, we don't hate any of them, but we talk about them from a fantasy perspective, and they're human beings. They're going through a lot of stuff. They live life just like we do. And so, look, Dak's definitely, he and his family, lifting them up and hoping for the best. It was just sad, watching him. You saw how much he meant to all those guys. It wasn't just about the season. They had a true connection, a bond, with Dak Prescott. So, but as far as Andy Dalton goes, the problem with Andy Dalton, and Drake, he can be a serviceable quarterback, but he can be a turnover machine. If you really put him in a position where he is not augmented by other things that help make him better, like play action and running and all the other things to try to balance things out. He can turn into a nightmare really fast. I like Andy Dalton. I live in Fort Worth. He's from TCU. So, I've seen the guy play live multiple times. Also another great person, but I think they're going to try to curtail things. This is a team that's run the most plays in the league. And Mike McCarthy's even come out and said it. He said, look, we were basically just trying to outscore everybody. And, we were coming out, we were running hot, this pace we were running. We were going to run as many plays or more plays than anybody. And I think you're going to see that change now. Now, how much the defense allows them, I don't know. But for example, this last week, if you look at their plays, they ran 66, which isn't bad, but that's by far the fewest they've ran, on the season. They're normally up in the 80s, which is insane, in the low end of the 80s. But they also only trailed for 32% of the plays. If you look at them for the season, they've trailed on 62% of snaps. So it was also the first game where they actually could slow down a little bit because they're playing the Giants and they weren't losing the whole game. They spent the game pretty much in a close mode, or winning. And so that allowed them to do part of that. So I think we'll see. I think Andy Dalton is not a quarterback one for the season. I think he's a QB1 this week. They're going to play against, the Cardinals. The Cardinals have ran 356 plays, which is in the top 5. You got the Cowboys as the number 1 team. So there's still the potential for the shootout. I think this downgrades everyone. I think it downgrades Amari Cooper. I think it downgrades CeeDee Lamb. It downgrades Dalton Schultz. The only player it probably doesn't hurt is Zeke. I think Zeke's going to be fine. And I think it downgrades Michael Gallup. You still got the problem with no Tyron Smith, no La'el Collins. And so it's just going to be hard to really get deep shots off in the offense. I think Andy Dalton will be a functional quarterback, but I've had people DM me, hey, do I drop Brady for him? Hey, do I drop Stafford for him? Hey, do I drop so-and-so insert? I think he's going to be – I'm not dropping him for Brady for sure. I'm not dropping him for Stafford. I think it's close. I wouldn't mind carrying both guys, Drake, but I don't see him as a clear cut. I'm just going to take him over these other guys. I love his weapons, but you and I have seen this before. Just because you have the weapons doesn't all of a sudden make you a great quarterback, right? I mean, we've seen it time and time again. So I think he's serviceable. I think he's got really good weapons, so he's going to be solid. He's definitely going to have some weeks where he could be, QB 2, 3. I just think it's tough because he's going to be in a situation where other teams are, for the most part, because they can't. What he really needs, Drake, is for them to come out and actually be able to establish a lead. That would actually be better for Andy Dalton. If the other team knows what he's doing, that's bad for Andy Dalton.
I think what's going to hurt him is playing the NFC East, like you mentioned, because those teams can't score. So you're not getting that shootout effect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I like him. I like playing defense in season long. I like in 2020.
Yeah, he's definitely worth crazy.
Adding. Yeah. I don't want to have a week where I don't have a backup quarterback now. I was rolling with Cam Newton in a couple leagues, and I'm like, you know what? Big Ben was on the waiver wire. I'm like, I don't like carrying 2 QBs, but man, with these games getting moved around and canceled at the last minute, you've got to have a legit backup quarterback. You can't just go to the waiver wire and go like, oh man, all right, I guess it's, Kyle Allen's out there, so we're rolling with him. You can't do that, guys. You're not going to win your league that way. Let me get a quick rundown here. It's not a huge waiver wire week for running backs. Obviously, Madison should be owned everywhere. Edmonds mostly should be owned everywhere. Justin Jackson, who played last night. Dwayne, if those guys are out there, Edmonds, Jackson, obviously 1, 2, nothing really to talk about there.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is none of them are going to be long-term answers, right, for their teams.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson clearly took over we've been pretty high on Josh Kelly. He ended up winning the role we had hoped he would win. But last night, I mean, you watched the game. I was like, wow, Justin Jackson by far looks like the better player to me.
Crushed him.
Now, things can change quickly, right? It can come down to the way the other team played them, the type of runs, that they were giving Kelly versus what they were giving Jackson. A couple of Jackson's biggest runs came on draw plays, so that's always kind of something you can dismiss to some extent. So, I mean, there's some weird things going on there, but he just seemed to have more juice. Kelly just never could get going, just didn't seem to be able to stay over his feet, was always leaning forward and, about to fall over the whole time, just didn't look good overall. Now, the Saints' run defense is not, a sieve, is not as good as it used to be. So it wasn't the easiest matchup. I mean, obviously Madison's the lead one, Drake. He should be owned everywhere in smaller leagues. If he's not, the problem is if he's available, the Dalvin Cook owner has to put a ton of money out there on him, so it's not probably going to be a situation like what we have with McCaffrey or, even like what we're probably expecting with Eckler. Growins can be a very tricky thing. We never want to hear growing. So, I mean, I would say you got to put an enforcing bid in on Madison, and you'll know your league better than we do. You also know what your team needs are, but you get this week and then you get a bye. So he's going to for sure play this week. You get a bye. And there's a chance for Dalvin Cook to come back. Now, there's always a chance for aggravation, and if that happens and for some reason Cook is all of a sudden misses 4 or 6 games, Madison can win you your league. So you don't want to just dismiss him. You always want to have running back depth. He really shouldn't be available, but if he is, I still think, he's a 25 to 30%er just because he shouldn't be out there, period. Because Dalvin Cook has other injuries beyond just the growing issue. Jackson, I would say, 10 to 20% type guy, at this point, because now another week's already gone, right? Where Eckler, is another week closer, to returning, and he's probably going to be out another 2 to 3 weeks. So, I mean, you could get a few weeks out of him, but you're still going to have Josh Kelly involved. Like, I just don't think it's going to turn into, it's 100, 70-30. Now,
he's not talented enough to take that job by himself.
Yeah, I mean, it did look more like he pretty much took over the Eckler role the other night. I still think it could be a hot hand thing, though. So, yeah, there's not anybody to put, a ton down on. Who was the other one? Sorry, you mentioned one other.
Yeah, Madison, Edmonds, and Jackson. I mean, Edmonds, we'll just get into it with the cards here.
He shouldn't be on the wire.
No.
He's the guy that, honestly, that I would probably put, I'd put him right there even, with Madison. Because if Drake goes down, we've already seen Edmonds is flashing way more than Drake.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of if he ends up with the role, people are going to love it.
Yeah. I mean, Chase Edmonds, for the first time, ran more routes than Kenyan Drake. Drake still had 18 carries for 60 yards. Thank God he got in the end zone, folks. I got him on a team. You would have thought, we were they just won the Super Bowl. In a 10-minute period, I had DJ Moore and Kenyan Drake score. It was like Jesus himself came into my house and like blessed my phone to watch those points go on. It was insane. So what do we do, though, if we've got Kenyan Drake? Is this the time to sell high, Dwain, and say, all right, I got to get out of Dodge on this because this looks bad?
I don't think you can sell Kenyan Drake high right now. Like, I don't think that's like even a thing. Like, what? Because he scored 1 touchdown? I mean, I guess
yes.
If it is, and you think you can. But really, he's probably that 1 touchdown's not going to be enough for you to get what you think Kenyan Drake is still worth. Because guess what? He could still be playing injured. He doesn't look like he did last year. So there's something going on. So I would rather hold than sell at what the price probably is. If you've got a owner just dead at running back and they are willing to offer you something valuable, fine. Yeah, I'm always willing to move, in that case. But you still got to make it worth, your while.
Let's get into these wide receivers now, Dwain. And let's start because they played against each other with the Eagles-Steelers game. This showcased Chase Claypool and Travis Fulgham. Let's start with Claypool. It was his big coming out party. So Deontay Johnson goes down early in the game, okay? All of Claypool's receiving touchdowns were scored against a horrendous Eagles secondary. None of them were where he was guarded by Darius Slay. So that's important to note. The last one, he was guarded by a linebacker. It was a complete joke. Either way, 7 for 110 and 3 touchdowns on 11 targets while only running 28 routes, 67%, compared to Juju, who ran 40, James Washington, who ran 38. Do we think, Dwain, if Deontay's healthy, Juju's healthy, this sort of role for Claypool still exists, or is this just kind of a crazy fluke and it just happened against a terrible, terrible defense?
Yeah, so I mean, a few things. One, I don't think it's a fluke because we've seen him doing these things all season. Like, he's showing up every game and making a play or two. So I think he is a legit player. I think Deontay Johnson is in a specific role that he will probably keep as long as he comes back. It was really, to your point, James Washington that took over, the snaps for Deontay Johnson during this game. Claypool's role is really, and we talked about this a little last week, I think, on the show, Drake. He's the third wideout in a team that runs 11 personnel average, right? Slightly above average in the league. So, I mean, they're going to run, 11. Now, they could start to run 11 personnel more because he's so good, right?
Yeah.
That could definitely happen. And he's not a liability as a blocker. If he's against, a nickel cornerback, he can handle, that. And honestly, that's something like the Steelers just need to go away from like the 12 and those kind of formations and get 3 and 4 receivers on the field. That's really their best personnel.
Sure.
Even if you're going to keep McDonald in as your inline guy, and that means Ebron just needs to be off the field, or let Ebron be one of the players on the field with Claypool. The problem is he's getting about 60-40 of that work versus James Washington. If you really try to isolate it and look at it outside of just the Deontay Johnson role. So that means you're on a team that runs 11 slightly more than the league average, and you're getting slightly above average of those looks. So it's not great. Now, the thing that is good for Claypool is even though his target rate's only 14% on the season, Drake, his targets per route is 23%. So that shows you, like, when he's out there, they want to get him the ball. He had 39% this last week, 149 air yards. So he's the classic conundrum, Drake. You got talent you've seen production, and you're wondering, will rational coaching take effect? And we just don't, it's hard to predict, right? Think of all the situations we broke down before the season where we were worried about Joe Mixon, but people will say, man, they're going to give it to Mixon because he's great. And it's hard to argue against it because rational coaching would be, you just let Mixon take the rollover. Same thing with Josh Jacobs, but they don't. And so will Mike Tomlin let him just fully take over that third wide receiver role? If he does that, then even on the 70%, 65% of snaps he's out there, Drake, I think he's a viable wide receiver 3 that can still boom into a wide receiver 2, even give you a wide receiver 1 week here or there. You're going to get a few wide receiver 4 weeks where you're not crazy about it, but you could probably live with it, especially in medium to larger size leagues, still tougher in small leagues. Now, if he can't just take that role away from Washington, I think it becomes more problematic. So from a free agent, blind bid type scenario, I think Claypool, I'm thinking it's probably not going to be enough, right? I'm thinking he's in the 35-40% range. We are going into week 6. So, you can't just sit here and keep your powder dry forever. But I just don't think I'm ready to put over half.
I've never heard that before in my life.
What?
Living up here, keep your powder dry.
Yeah, you never heard that? It's like
I live in upstate New York, man. I've never keep your powder dry. That's tremendous.
It's just like, you're conserving ammo, basically. So at some point, do you continue to conserve ammo or do you just go out in a blaze of glory is what it means. And so when you think about a guy like Claypool, that's the call you got to make. And you know what? You, me, nobody, no analyst in this country can give you the answer to that. Yeah. We just can't. It's a guess. So if you're the type of owner that likes to bet on talent, I'm not going to shame anybody if they're like, man, I'm dropping the whole wad on him. Go ahead. I mean, the guy flashed something that we never see. It's not like he just scored 2 touchdowns, right? He scored 3 plus a rushing touchdown. And, oh, by the way, had another one called back on offensive pass interference. So, the guy could have scored 5 touchdowns in one game. Anytime something like that happens, you got to wake up and look at it. And here's the other thing, Drake. It's like Juju ain't doing anything.
That's what I wanted to ask. A lot of guys are hitting us up. They go, what do I do with Juju? What do I do with Deontay? Would those have been Deontay's touchdowns? So
I don't think they're Deontay's touchdowns because of the nature of the way some of them happen and the way they use Claypool, right? So remember, Washington was really playing Deontay's spot. Claypool was still really playing his spot. You already hit on it. Ran a route on 67% of the routes. The week before was 81%. So the key is, with Deontay out, is that the only reason James Washington was on the field? Because if it is, and Claypool's going to keep all that work he had, well, great. He's worth it. You should pick him up. But if not, and he and Washington are going to continue to split, then it's a problem.
All right. On the other side of the field was the Philadelphia Eagles. And here's this kid, Travis Fulgham. I believe he was a 6th-round draft pick of the Detroit Lions. Eagles, like everyone that they play these days, picked him up off a practice squad. Here he comes, 13 targets, 10 receptions for $152 and a score. Now, he obviously has a rapport with Carson Wentz. The big question going forward is, how much playing time is he going to see when Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, Jalen Reagor, who they just drafted in the 1st round, don't forget Dallas Goedert. All these guys are going to be coming back. All of these guys have major draft capital, major money tied up into them. But this team needs a playmaker. They need someone who can be on the field. The best ability is availability. And this kid is there doing everything they've asked. I think for the next few weeks, he has a role. I just don't know when all those guys are back, what you're going to get out of this kid.
Yeah, man, I'm 100% with you. He's another one I just don't know what to do with once Alshon's back. You're also going to get, Reagor back before long. We know Reagor will be in the plans.
Yep.
If they decided, we're tired of Deshaun. We're tired of all the soft tissue injuries this guy's producing. I could see Fulgham turning into, he could give you some wide receiver 3 weeks. The problem is, even if he maintains a spot and say Jeffrey and Reagor make it back, then it becomes like this 3 to 4, you have 3 to 4 options. Mm-hmm. And Zach Ertz, he's underperformed, but he may look dead. Like, he definitely looks like a corpse when he's moving, but he's still on the field a ton. He's still going to be in their plans. So I think it's just problematic, for the biggest thing for me with Fulgham, is this last week, he had 12 targets. That's 34% of the targets. I just don't see that holding up, even if he manages to stay on the field a bit. So for me, he's a guy that 5-10%, but make him your backup bid to a guy like Claypool.
Mm-hmm.
Also in the chat room, somebody asked, drop Hardman for Claypool. One thing I would say with Hardman is, remember,
the next guy we're going to talk about.
Sammy Watkins got hurt. So Sammy Watkins is out for a few weeks. Now, he still doesn't get on the field. He's not going to replace all of Sammy's snaps because he can't block at all. Like, he cannot run block at all. Like, if you guys should go watch it, it's actually kind of funny. Like, he gets thrown around like a rag doll. He cannot get in front of anyone. It's pretty funny.
It's like AJ Green trying to make a tackle.
Yes, it's very similar to that. So I think that's I would rather carry Claypool than Hardman. The problem is, like, this could be your 3 to 4 week window for Hardman. You're like, man, I drafted him in the 9th round. I kept him. Well, now's your time. This is your time. He could be the third option, right, behind Tyreek Hill and behind Travis Kelce in the passing game over these next several weeks. Of course, you and I both know it could also easily go to Robinson,
Yep.
who will show up with these 3 touchdown games.
Byron
So I would
prefer
prefer Claypool, and here's why. I think Hardman, once the other players come back, because of his limited skill set, he immediately goes back to the bench. I think Claypool has an opportunity with his skill set to literally force his way to being on the field all the time. He's not a liability blocking, so you can have him on the field in a multitude of ways. And he does things that your other receivers don't do as well. I mean, honestly, there's probably not a lot of receivers in the league that can do some of the things he can, as far as high pointing and just creating, mismatch issues. And he's still fast as well. And man, they're scheming him up. They get him in the screen game. They get him in the running game. So I would prefer Claypool at this point. Just ahead of time, be okay with yourself next week when Hardman has 4 catches for what, Drake, 120 and 2 Ts, like that. That's still within his range of outcomes. It's hard to say, do I start Claypool, given what we know about his role right now, versus Hardman? They're kind of in similar situations. I just like Claypool, the player, better, so I lean that way.
If T. Higgins is still out there,
he should be added over both.
Yes, get
he
him
should
on
be
there.
Your primary. Yes.
AJ Green quit on that team.
Yeah,
I'm a guy. I played a lot of sports growing up. I played college sports. If I had a guy on my team pull the BS that he did trying to make that tackle, like, dude, that guy's not getting on the bus. That was garbage. And he's on the bench. They didn't trade me. He didn't want to be there to begin with. Just get rid of this guy. All right. Get rid of him already. T. Higgins is going to start at X for the rest of the year for the Bengals. In my opinion here, AJ Green never plays another snap in Cincinnati.
And I hate to say it, man, because I like AJ Green. I didn't know this was like a gear he had, it makes me sad, but yeah, I agree. And hopefully you added T. Higgins 2 weeks ago when we told you guys to, but 93% of the routes, here are his targets over the last 3 weeks, 9, 7, 6, that's 23, 21, 23% on a team that typically runs a lot of plays, man. They just literally, this was almost like the Bengals we saw at the end of last year, Drake, where they were literally like, let's just get the freak off the field, get this game over with. So some of you folks being like, oh my God, look at Joe Mixon. We told you he got 6 or 7 targets. He had 6 the week before. Yeah, guess what? He didn't play any of the 2-minute offense, played very little of the long down and distance offense. Once they're back into a more competitive game, literally they were just throwing the ball to him on 1st and 2nd down so Joe Burrow wouldn't get destroyed. They were trying to get out of that game without having their young quarterback die. And they successfully did that. But yes, T. Higgins, absolutely. I would put him at the top of the list of any of these receivers we talked about.
Let me just go back to the Eagles. Dallas Goedert may have been dropped in a number of leagues with his ankle injury. If he's out there and you could scoop him up for free and maybe stick him on an IR or something, folks, by all means, make that move.
What are they saying, Drake? I haven't even looked. What are they saying as far as when he'll be back?
Possibly week 7.
Oh, wow.
He's eligible to come back. So
heck yeah.
That's
another problem for a guy like Fulgham, right? It's like all of a sudden you get Alshon back, you get Deshaun back, you get Rager back, you get Goddard back. At that point, Fulgham, unfortunately, dude, the guy's made a big play the week before. Against the 49ers. I feel bad for him. And he's got some talent. He's a guy that some of the draft nicks liked, when he was coming out. They talked about him potentially being a a big slot, that kind of thing. And so, I mean, I think he's a player in Dynasty to obviously keep an eye on. You might, he should be on rosters there. But in season long, man, don't drop a lot on him.
So we appreciate all the great questions in the chat room. If you're on there and you're watching us on YouTube, click that like button, give us some comments, and, we'd hope you hit that subscribe button also. And if you're looking ahead, like you're looking at Dallas Goedert, you're looking at bye weeks because the Chargers, Raiders, Saints, and Seahawks are all on bye. We don't really like to talk about teams that are going off on bye because, hey, we can save some time. But I would like to talk very quickly, Dwain, about Henry Ruggs. He came back, and while he only caught 2 balls, he turned him into a $118 and a score. Now, oh my God, Derek Carr can throw the ball more than 2 yards down the field. Look what it does. It helps you knock off the defending champion. So Ruggs is a guy I saw on waiver wires because I picked him up in a league. So, even though he's on bye, don't be afraid.
He shouldn't be on waivers, and maybe him being on bye helps you get him for cheap. In small formats, fine, leave him there. Mid-size, deeper leagues should be rostered. And here's the way I look at Henry Ruggs. He got hurt in week 1. So yeah, his snaps have been 67%. Then he played 61%. He gutted it out in week 2. Then he didn't play, the next 2 games. And then he played 62 or 64%. So his routes are 72, 65, 62. And I heard some people talk about that, and that could be really his role, but we don't know what his role is when he's healthy. What I like is he's getting work out of the slot, Drake. So in his weeks, 51%. He's 51% from the slot on the year. So that's 61, 47, and 48. They're moving him all over the formation. He's getting a decent amount of looks on play action. 36% of his passes are coming off of play action. Mm-hmm. He's the first read on 82% of his targets, which is first outside of Darren Waller on the team. So I think he has a chance to be the second guy in the equation for this team that's still looking. Yes, Aguilar's playing a lot of snaps. He comes up with a play here or there. Nelson Aguilar is just Nelson Aguilar. I mean, I can probably stop and hand the show over to you at this point. You've seen enough of Nelson Aguilar to know better than I would that he will flash on you and then he disappears.
Sure, and so as a first-round pick.
Yeah, exactly. So Ruggs is the guy for me. I definitely want him on any roster I can have him on, where it makes sense.
And if you're playing DFS, this used to be, and it probably still is, true with Will Fuller. If you're doing a GPP lineup, put Henry Ruggs on it because he can, help get you 30 points in a blink of an eye. So,
yeah, I had him in several this weekend, and it was so awesome because FanDuel was literally down for like 2 days, and I didn't get the joy of watching, my lineups.
And Mike Williams could be on a couple of waiver wires. You saw him last night.
I picked him up in skank leagues last week ahead of this stuff. So I know he's got to be available all over the place.
Oh, yeah. He was doing nothing for a while. And then after this week, he'll go back to doing nothing. But, hey, you saw the ability. If you can get him out there on the roster, why not? Somebody just said, "Would you, Mike Williams is available in my league. Would you take him over Claypool?"
Man, I'm going to lean Williams just because he's on the field all the time over Claypool. And they're really similar players. Like Mike Williams could be used in the same way Claypool is. What is the latest we've heard on Keenan Allen, Drake?
It was a slight back injury, just back spasms. Hopefully nothing too bad. Nothing structural.
So it's just something where he's probably back next week. They just got to manage it. Okay. Yeah. So I'm still going Mike Williams, but it's really close. I mean, I'm not going to blame you if you go Claypool. I totally get it. But like both are similar situations, right? You really have 2 offenses with multiple weapons. You've got Deontay Johnson when he's healthy. You've got Juju Smith-Schuster. Then you've got Claypool and you've got James Washington rotating in. Same thing. You've got Hunter Henry. You've got Keenan Allen, who's really the one. You're going to have Eckler coming back at some point. He's involved in the passing game. And you have Mike Williams. So it's hard to predict on any of these teams, like who's your guy going off each week. They're kind of similar situations. So to me, if they're both available, I may put a little less because I know that I can get both, right? Or I can get one of 2. So I may not put as much on Claypool, but I put equal amounts on Claypool and on, Mike Williams. The thing with Mike Williams also, Drake, is like, and you saw it last night, like, does anybody in the league fall harder and take and like hit his head his shoulders, like because he's such a good jump ball player, but he's a big dude and coming down
Dude's like
that.
6'5". He jumped straight up, caught a ball, and then just landed on his back. I defy anyone right now who's listening to this. Go in your living room, jump straight up and land on your back and see how fun that is with a guy falling on top of you who probably weighs 200 pounds.
Let us know if you're able to make it back to the show next week or if you're in a hospital bed. Because put a helmet on first.
T-shirt.
Put a helmet on first, people. Okay?
Oh, man. We love young, ascending, elite talent. And that's what they've got in Jacksonville with Laviska Shenault. Now, DJ Chark, just put it on Twitter, DJ Chark ankle, and you're going to come up with all these injuries that he had in college with this same ankle that bothered him last year and took him out of some games. Here's a fun stat I found on RotoViz, so shout out to those guys. He quietly ranks his 23 receptions, Shenault, ranks 17th among wide receivers. So here's a guy who's getting rushing attempts, and he just got 8 targets this week. The last 2 weeks before that, 6 and 6. If you can now get the number one receiver on an offense that's constantly trailing, folks, that's a home run. Why wouldn't you want this guy on your roster?
Yeah. I mean, the only problem with Shenault is he's just really not out there a ton, but he's similar to what we talked about, not to the extent of Claypool. But if you look at his target share on the season, it's 16%, Drake, but his targets per route is 20%. So they're slightly favoring him when he's on the field, but not quite by enough. So yeah, I like his receptions. I do think he's got some run after the catch ability. I think the big problem for him is he's still been limited in practice. So there could be upside, hidden in his run after the catch ability and some of these other things once he's fully healthy. And his role could grow. I mean, to me, yeah, Keelan Cole's a nice story. He's the bigger playmaker. Basically, he's what we had hoped Curtis Samuel would be, maybe. But he's not quite healthy yet. And so I think he's going to have a shot to make some bigger plays as the season goes along. Yeah, he should be rostered in all medium to large formats for sure. Another one of these rookie receivers. Look, rookie receivers are they're part of the equation this year, Drake. You got Justin Jefferson, you got Shenault. We'll see what Ruggs does. We'll see what Claypool does. Ayuk is already doing his thing. And then you're going to get Jalen Reagor back. The Eagles, obviously, they're looking for somebody to make plays for them. So rookie wide receivers, man, there's going to be 1 or 2 of these guys that are maybe 3 that are going to end up on championship teams.
You're getting shout outs in the chat room on your video quality tonight, Dwain. So that's always a nice thing.
It's funny. And I've got TV going at the same time. Hey man, just so you guys know, I have been all over our internet provider, to come out here. I live way out in the country. And honestly, we're lucky we can even do this. Most of my neighbors can't even stream Netflix. It's so bad.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I'm lucky that I live close enough, to where, the outlet is. I don't know all this. Somebody probably in the chat room, understands this stuff better than me, but they came out and they put in, a new wire. They ran it to my house because I'm not too far and we've been a customer for a long time, blah, blah, blah. So hopefully, it'll continue to be like this.
Got to get you some 5G out there and
dude, there's
the great state of Texas.
No. Mm-mm. Yeah, there is in Texas, not here where I live. There are literally horses across my street, Drake. So,
oh man, can they play for the Eagles? Can they play?
You and the family could come down and camp in my backyard.
My wife's she's not a camper. I try to do that. I live upstate New York here. It's beautiful. It's all lakes that are polluted and hills and mountains and things like that. But, people are here to talk fantasy football, and let's keep rolling along here. Let's go through the teams here. If you want a great read, I encourage you guys either go to establishtherun.com or pff.com. Dwain's utilization report, it's already out. You can subscribe to the site. There's so much content on there. It'll blow your freaking mind. Trust me. And it's out today. One of the interesting nuggets he had on there was about Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett from the Los Angeles Rams. Now, Higbee's a guy, he only has 8 targets over the last 3 weeks. Gerald Everett had 4 targets just on Sunday, caught all of them for 90 yards. So just kind of expand upon what is going on with the Rams tight ends, because some folks invested decent draft picks in Higbee thinking he's kind of like baby Kelsey, and, he's kind of just like baby Stewie right now.
I think he's still probably baby Kelsey from a talent standpoint. But again, it's this was our debate early in the season. What were the Rams going to do? How are they going to operate this? And Higbee just has to stay in the block too much, man. He's literally running routes at a rate at which you can just drop him unless you're in a really deep league.
Wow.
Could Higbee catch 2 touchdown passes next week? Yeah, he could. But guess what? It's going to be – you're never going to know when those are coming. You're just not going to know. I mean, he is literally – he's not running a route even on 55% of snaps, Drake. I mean, of pass plays. Like,
Jeez.
that's atrocious. As far as Gerald Everett goes, just let it go. Don't even – look, the guy ran 8 routes last week. No need for me to tell you a percentage. Like, there's 8 routes. And yes,
ball done for half of them, hey.
Talented, gonna get him on the field more. Really? Come on, guys. We've been here. We've done this before. McVay is rotating all these guys. They're going to use Cooper Kupp. They're going to use Robert Woods. They got, Josh Reynolds outside. So Everett, it's just hard for him to find his way on the field. And here's the problem. People are like, well, but if Higbee goes down, he could explode. I mean, could he? Really? I mean, I don't know. Because most likely what's going to happen is he's going to have to block more. They don't like him as a blocker. That means we probably see Johnny Munt more, and you're just going to see Cooper and Woods go up. And, yeah, they'll find a way to get Everett on the field a little bit more in passing situations, but it's still not going to be something I think that you can trust. So, really, I don't think he belongs on rosters except in super deep tight end premium type formats, obviously dynasty, those kind of things, you're going to keep the guy around. But as far as, in medium, to regular size leagues, Gerald Everett is a non-ad. Do not waste any of your money on him and do not put him in your lineup.
How about those running backs? McVay came out after the game, and said that they want to get Cam Akers more involved going forward.
Yeah,
that's
whatever.
great.
We trust you as much as Bruce Arians.
So who knows? I know it's tough to put any of those guys in your lineup because, the week you think it's going to be Darrell Henderson, it's Malcolm Brown. And then here comes Cam Akers. And then, hey, look, we just signed Le'Veon Bell. So,
yeah, Darrell Henderson looks the best by far. I don't think it's close right now. Darrell Henderson, when I'm watching and you just see the guys rotate in and out, you're like, that's the guy I want on the field. And he's the guy that we talked about the least in the preseason. We got that wrong. We may not be wrong. Akers could end up taking over the backfield. But to me, Henderson looks too good at this point to say that it's going to be Akers season. I'm at the point now where I just don't see Akers season happening unless Henderson gets hurt.
It's the Kareem Hunt show in Cleveland. Dominated the carries until late in the fourth. I think he had some cramps and he ended up leaving the game. Otherwise, those numbers of carries would have been even more skewed. This guy's an RB1, folks, until Chubb returns. The pass game is clicking.
He's the RB1 until
Chubb RB1.
Yes, dude.
Even my man Mike Davis?
Yeah, well, exceptions for Mike Davis.
Yeah, please.
But no, I think he's if I had to pick, you told me, I get to start a running back in the entire NFL over the next
besides Mike Davis
3 weeks. Over the next 3 weeks, you told me I just had to pick one.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked at all the buys and everything, but look, you get a 3-game sample. I'm going with Hunt.
Yeah, they're looking good. What I noticed about this game is Baker looked terrible early in the season, and we mentioned that here on the show. But something's kind of clicking in my eyes with this offense, and it looks like they're kind of funneling all these targets. It's not. I know that Rashad Higgins caught a touchdown or whatever, but Hooper's getting a boatload of targets. Jarvis Landry's getting a ton of targets. Beckham's getting his. So it's kind of really funneled to the guys that we care about. And for fantasy, that is all we care about. So I like what I'm seeing, at least with this pass game in Cleveland. I don't know. Is that kind of resonating on your side?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is Beckham is the alpha. I see people saying, it's funny what all we call alpha, if somebody edges somebody out. Beckham truly is. He is head and shoulders right above, his teammates on his targets. He's at 28%, on the year. If you look at Jarvis Landry, he is at 19% on the year. If you look at Austin Hooper, right now he is sitting at 19%, on the year. So you're right. It's being spread out just across a few people, which you need because it's a low passing volume offense. But Beckham is the one because he's up there towards the 30% mark, which is really what you need in an offense that runs such a low pass volume. But man, his targets are the juiciest. I mean, 44%, Drake, of his targets coming on play action. That is freaking awesome for a guy that can run after the catch like Beckham, a guy that's a mismatch, issue for any cornerback anyway. I mean, that is just money in the bank. Odell Beckham is a lock. Wide receiver 1 could end up in the top 6 wide receivers in a year where we're going to have some really high scoring wide receivers.
Appreciate all you guys who are flipping over to the YouTube channel, talking in the chat. If you want to leave a question or two, we might have a little time at the end for me to ask Dwain your start, sit, or trade or add, drop, whatever you got, because the Tennessee Titans are just straight up beating the crap out of the Buffalo Bills right now. So, I think every game, by the way, should start at 7 p.m. Eastern time. It's so nice for a guy like me. I've got kids. I got a wife. It gets dark here now at like 5:30. It's the worst. So I love it. Start everything at 7 when these World Series games are starting at like 9 o'clock. I can't deal with it. So let's just get games on every night. It's going to happen eventually. All right, we'll keep bopping around the league here. Let's see. Spin the wheel, make the deal. Let's find a team. How about San Francisco, Dwain? Jimmy Garoppolo re-aggravated his ankle, sat out in the second half. Our man Beathard came in. Everything was off for San Francisco. The only high note was Raheem Mostert returning. He gave you 90 yards on 11 carries. But, Jerick McKinnon, 1 carry, caught 2 balls. That's not fun.
Yeah, I mean, and what's the most concerning part, like for me on that particular situation, Drake, is the fact that if there was a game with Mostert coming back, that you would anticipate, oh man, McKinnon really retained his value, in this scenario. What would it be? It would be a trailing game script, right? If you look at the 49ers, in week 5, they trailed by 4 points or more, 95% of the plays, and somehow Jerick McKinnon couldn't be involved. That's weird. We can't figure out Kyle Shanahan. You just can't. Like the week before, he gave the whole load to McKinnon, 92%, of snaps and 81%. Now Raheem Mostert comes back, and all of a sudden in a game where you're trailing, and he was out there for 100%, Drake, of the 3rd down and 4th down and long down and distance. He was out there for 100% of the 2-minute passing offense. So what does that tell us? That's his only role right now. That's it. That's his role.
Beathard's not checking down to him.
Beathard's not checking down to him. And guess what? Raheem Mostert not looking too good either, buddy, because they're keeping another guy involved. You still have, freaking Wilson involved, and then you're going to get Coleman involved. So the way I look at Mostert is, he's a tick below your Josh Jacobs and your Joe Mixons, the guys that all have game script issues because they're not heavily involved in their passing game, at least not in a way that you can count on week in and week out by the way they're used. That's going to be Mostert, but he's even a little tick below that because you got a 3-man show. And you got a team that just the defense isn't as good, Drake. So they're not going to be as close in these games. They're going to have to go to shootout mode. Now, the good news is that's great for Deebo Samuel, who came out and ran a route on 89% of his plays in his second week back in action. That's great. He got 24% of the targets. Brandon Ayuk out there for another rookie love, 96% of the routes. He got targeted 15%. And of course, you know that George Kittle's still going to get his. So the good news, I think the positive for the 49ers is that if you're invested in their passing game, you're going to get, and of course they got to get the quarterback thing settled, but you're going to get better volume out of this passing offense than you ever thought. You were going to have to live off of efficiency before. Now you're in a situation where if they continue with play action, they continue with strong play design, but their defense sucks, you could literally end up with Deebo and Ayuk ending up in the top 36 receivers, and you could still have George Kittle as a top 6 tight end. George Kittle's a top 2 tight end, right? But you could still have those other guys. Now they're going to have some ebb and flow week to week, but there's going to be enough volume to go around because this isn't going to be a team that's only passing the ball 20 times anymore. And who gets hurt the most? Raheem Mostert.
A lot of guys, when I listen to shows over the summer, were super high on Terry McLaurin. The same thing was said over and over and over again. Never leave a draft without Terry McLaurin. And I struggled with this because his quarterback was so bad. And it's just a bad offense with a terrible offensive line. And I never want to be tied to that in fantasy. And he's had a couple good games here so far. I don't want to, crap on Terry McLaurin. He's a very talented player. If Kyle Allen or the great story that is Alex Smith has to play quarterback for an extended period of time, you can punt on Terry McLaurin. It's over.
Yeah, I agree. I want nothing to do with it at that point because Alex Smith is going to what? Check it down. Kyle Allen, what? Has no accuracy deep. We saw him just torpedo a potential breakout year last season for Curtis Samuel, who's now been stuck back into an underneath role. But Curtis Samuel was getting open at will last season, down the field, deep crossers, deep outs, comebacks. I mean, the guy was playing really, really well, and it got completely buried because of Kyle Allen. So now who's going to be impacted? Who is basically playing Curtis Samuel's role from last year's offense, which is the same offense. It's, the same coordinator. Terry McLaurin is playing Curtis Samuel's role from last year, and he's the guy that's going to be hurt the most. So there's no middle ground between these two guys. It really, really is bad for Terry McLaurin, but if you can sell high right now on his name value, and to Drake's point, he still had some solid weeks. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to do it. Even if he blows up a few more weeks, I'm with Drake on this. I think he's going to really struggle to give you any kind of consistency. And if you can get something out of his name value, you go ahead and do it.
I'm all about selling high and buying on some dips. This past week, I made a trade where I got rid of Antonio Gibson, and there were some other parts into it. And I ended up Zeke Elliott was the big piece coming back to me. Antonio Gibson is a guy everyone loves for his raw ability. But again, the line is terrible. Team is terrible. 11 carries, 27 yards versus the Rams. They were giving up 123 yards on average a game on the ground, and he went for 27. I know he's great. He's explosive. I can't trust this kid, Dwain, in my lineup, and I was happy to move off of him. Maybe as a flex, hey, he's going to blow up, but I don't trust this team. I don't want to hinge my fantasy success on crap teams like the Washington football team.
Yeah, I totally get it. The only positive for Gibson is that he saw 92% of the rushing attempts, and that is a trend that's continued. He's gone from 41% to 62 to 92%. Here's the problem. What was the whole thing about, they want a pony? Adrian Peterson was talking about a pony, maybe a My Little Pony, because this dude is not getting used in the passing game. 0% of the 2-minute work, not trusted. 0% of the long down and distance. That's still all going to J.D. McKissic, world beater, Drake. You got to get J.D. McKissic on the field. I mean, you have to. If you do not have J.D. McKissic on the field, you're going to lose. Oh, wait, Redskins, you suck. You're losing. Just let this kid play. Just put him out there. Mm-hmm. Oh, really? He doesn't know how to do X or Y? Well, let him. I guess, you don't want to have Alex Smith return, to get destroyed, which happened anyway. So is Antonio Gibson any worse than what Alex Smith already went through? Can you imagine that being your first game back, Drake? And I mean, Aaron Donald is just like, a crazed person coming after you every play. I feel like Aaron Donald took it easy on him like a couple of times, which I didn't know he was capable of doing. Like one time he just jumped on his back. Like he didn't even really hit him. He just jumped on his back, and he just basically, I think he just whispered in his ear, "Just go down, bro. Just go down. Just take a knee."
Yeah, really.
But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's not something you can trust. If you guys really need to move on, I get it. I know it's hard because in peak draft season, this was a guy creeping into the 6th, 5th, 7th rounds of drafts, depending on how aggressive people wanted to be. So I know that hurts, but you're at the point where if you need to move on, you can. If you're in deeper, medium-sized formats, obviously you're just stashing him, but you're not going to have him in your lineup.
Last team we'll talk about, and then we'll hit a couple of questions from our great friends here in the YouTube chat room. Again, search Fantasy Football Hustle on YouTube. Hit like, hit subscribe, comment on the videos. We'd love to hear who you're looking to pick up this week. Is it Claypool? Is it Fulgham? Some of your great start-sit questions, and we can get back to you that way. Atlanta, Dan Quinn's out, but Dirk Cutter's still there calling the plays. Todd Gurley, he's looking okay for Todd Gurley. 14 for 121 and a score. He doesn't look he doesn't look like Travis Etienne if you ever watch Clemson play, and you're just like, holy crap, this guy is like electric every time he touches the football. It's just, all right, well, he gets in the end zone. So, if you got him, you're happy. He's putting up numbers, and Ridley got back on track with 8 for 136. But Matt Ryan looks bad, dude. You texted that to me during the game. Like, he hasn't thrown a touchdown since week 3, I believe, in the first quarter of that game. His team is broken.
Yeah, all of a sudden his arm looks like Phillip Rivers.
All these old quarterbacks look awful.
Yeah, I think Matt Ryan can still probably be okay in this league, but not asking him to drop back and throw the ball 50 times a game. That's just not the recipe to help Matt Ryan win. I think you need to involve more play action. You need to get and I know running backs don't matter, but running game does matter. Yes, there is a fine line. There's a balance somewhere where the perfect equation is you should be throwing more often, than you maybe do today. Here's the big thing. I know it's kind of going off on a tangent.
Go for it.
The key is to surprise your opponent. So if you pass on a down they normally wouldn't think you would, guess what? You surprise them and you can get more yards. You can run on certain downs where they wouldn't think you would, right? And sometimes that's good, but typically more often passing is still your better option on those. Because what is that? That's a 2nd and 8 where you run a draw play, or it's a 3rd and 9 and you run a draw play. Typically, even when that play goes better than expected, a pass still would have been better. So the real key, for a team like Atlanta, would be to utilize passing more out of unconventional looks and things like that. Don't just come out and line up 3 and 4 wide receivers. You've already seen it's just not going to work. That's not going to be how you're going to win games. And I do think that it's part of that is Matt Ryan's arm has deteriorated, to some extent. The other part is Julio being hurt, or that's tough. Now, what I will say is, man, Calvin Ridley is open at will, and he was open the week before, but Ryan didn't trust him and didn't get him the ball. So there's no concerns with Ridley. It's more just, this offense. On Gurley, the one thing, Drake, let's keep an eye on it. His route percentage has gone from 33 to 38 to 51%. He saw 15% of the targets last week. You mentioned him getting a little involved in the passing game. The problem is then they dropped his carries. So he had been at 70% and that dropped to 54. So it's almost like, even though this is a 1-year deal, it's like they're capping his work. It's like, let's get this guy around 17 to 20 touches, and whatever that makes the percentages look like, well, whatever. But that's just kind of how we're going to use him. But we'll keep an eye on it. Let's see what happens with it. But what was encouraging is how he got to that. He was actually out there for half of the long down and distance snaps, which up until that point in the season, his previous high had been 33%, then 20 and 20%. So he took half of that work. Which normally had been Ito Smith. So it was really just more him and Brian Hill. Ito got in there a little bit, but that was a positive thing for Gurley. So we can check back in on that one next week and see if it's a trend or if it's just, kind of a blip.
I told my dear friend Dwain I'd get him out of here in an hour, and I got 2 minutes left, so I can answer some questions here from our friends.
We can go a little more for the folks that have questions.
All right, so
if we can do
hit us up here in the chat room. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. The show is at FF Hustle. You can check out Instagram. It's the same, at FF Hustle. I'm at Drake Fantasy. He is at Dwain McFarland. He writes for PFF and ETR. I'm at fightingchancefantasy.com. So follow us on there, man. There's a lot of good stuff. Guys at Fighting Chance are putting out tons of great content too. Really proud of the good young staff over there. All right, so let's see. Let me scroll through. Okay. Let's see some stuff other people might have a thing to. All right, here we go. Got to replace Dak. Tannehill or Fitzmagic?
Tannehill.
Okay. Standard league.
Tannehill's a top 12 quarterback for the remainder of the season, and he's given you top 6 weeks. Here's the thing with the Titans offense that people don't realize. They're still using play action, but they're running far more plays. So, last year, in the years before, this has been like Vrabel's had his thumb on the offense. We're talking like one of the lowest number of plays in the league. This year, they're well above league average. And so now all of a sudden you keep the same offense intact that was very efficient. You get more plays. Tannehill, he's got top 6 well within his range of outcomes.
Tannehill just beat Buffalo 42-16.
I mean, how many touchdowns did he throw tonight? 3 or 4?
3.
I didn't even get to watch. Yeah.
One of them,
that's like clockwork.
He was legit 3 yards over the line of scrimmage and threw a touchdown to, I believe, Juju Smith. That Twitter's going crazy.
They reviewed it. Hold it. But yeah, but he also ran for he also ran for a touchdown tonight. So I mean,
look at him.
Dan Tannehill is I love him. If he's on the wire, he should not be on the wire.
Mm-hmm. What do you do with Michael Thomas? You'd keep him, try to trade him. I mean, I think you'd keep him. Obviously, he's the best receiver.
Yeah,
in football.
You keep him and you play him. Look, he got into trouble for a behavioral issue. Great, now you get him back. You just plug him in. I know it sucks that you got to buy. So you basically had to, at this point, if you held him, you're already 5 weeks into the pain. You have one more week of pain, and then he gets the Panthers, and he could easily come out and light it up with 12 catches. So I mean, anybody that's willing to move Michael Thomas right now, you should be the buyer, not the seller.
Oh, let's see. Who are some good buy low candidates off the top of your head, Dwayne?
I mean, some of them, we've hit, and again, like it kind of sucks, right? Because it's the utilization versus the talent thing. So I still feel that Zach Ertz is still going to be in the top 12 tight ends. I still think he probably finishes in the top 7 or 8. They've just been fun, and you can tell people better than me, Drake. But to me, it's like other teams have basically said these other guys have to beat us. We're not going to let Zach Ertz beat us. And yeah, Zach Ertz doesn't look, agile or fast or any of those things, but he's never been great in those ways. But it's not because he's not out there. He's out there and he's getting targeted like 17, 19%. They just haven't been efficient on his targets. Yeah. And
remember last year? Remember last year that offense got so compressed because they had no speed. It's the same thing right now. There's no talent out there. Why do you think Travis Fulgham's getting 13 targets? Because nobody cares if Travis Fulgham beats you. You're not going to let Zach Ertz beat you. And that's why did Greg Ward have such a big second half last year? Because nobody cares about Greg Ward. You're not scheming to stop Greg Ward. You're going to put, bracket coverage on Zach Ertz and make sure that he doesn't beat you. And like every year, every Eagle's hurt. So let me find one more good one for you.
Yeah, well, a couple other just buy low ones real quick.
Yes, sir.
So I would still say DJ Moore is a buy low. He did score a touchdown last week, so his price might be a little bit higher, but he's still out there plenty. Yes, Robbie Anderson, is getting most of the targets, but it's just an ascending offense and they're looking good. So DJ Moore still wide receiver 24, even though everybody's complaining and crying, and his targets are still up there within the top 24. So I mean, like his utilization, everything says top 24 receiver. But for whatever reason, perception is lower than that in many places. The other guy I would mention, just because he's been dinged up, he's been on bye. If you can get Kenny Golladay, obviously you should go for it. Most likely if the owner's held on this long, he's going to continue to hold on. T.Y. Hilton, if he's going to be in a competitive matchup. Last week we saw what we needed to see. Finally, they were not just destroying a team in the fourth quarter. He lit it up from a utilization perspective. Wasn't great in the box score, but ran a ton of routes and was targeted, like 30% of the time. I'd have to go back and check the number again. So T.Y. Hilton, now it's going to be tough because they could just blow the Bengals out this week. And you're like, oh man, Dwayne, I grabbed him and he sucked. He's a wide receiver 3 for the season, but he's going to have wide receiver 2 weeks in games where you think that they're competitive. The other guy, just a sneaky guy for you guys, is Irv Smith. And it's not necessarily a buy low, but if you're really hurting at tight end, he ran the most routes he's seen all season, 73%, which is by far his season high. Remember last year we saw him start to take that rollover from Kyle Rudolph throughout the season. We thought that might continue early on this season, and it's taken a little bit. Not a guy you want to get in your lineups yet, but he's a guy that you can keep an eye on. The other player I would say is if for some reason people in your league are low on Tyler Lockett and they think, oh my God, DK is the second coming, which he looks great, and he's just going to take over everything because an announcer said that Russ Wilson said that DK Metcalf's going to be one of the best receivers ever to play, which he could be. Fine. Let me have Tyler Lockett buy low. I would absolutely buy low on Tyler Lockett.
It's funny, as you say that, a friend of mine in a home league sent out a text that Tyler Lockett was on the table. And I was like, all right, great. Who do you want for him? Please, God, let me have him. I beat him by about 90 points this week. Sorry, Hartman. All right, last question for Dwain. Who should I start for my flex? Chase Claypool, Chase Edmonds, or Antonio Gibson?
Oh, that's Claypool for me. I feel like that one's pretty easy for me.
There you go. All right, folks, we got to get him out. He just did a show with Ian Harditz of PFF. If you're not listening to that show, you should. Ian does a tremendous job. We got to get him on the hustle one week. Really good, energetic dude. I don't think he takes a breath. You think I talk fast? We take a load of him. It's me, him, and Rich Rebar, fastest talking guys in fantasy. So for Dwain McFarland, I am Brian Drake. Have a great week 6, everybody. God willing, we'll see you back here with a couple extra backup quarterbacks going into week 7. Take care, folks. Never get out hustled.